Nice to see you all here for the Hamilton Sangha service once again. It's been a little while. I guess I wasn't here in the summertime that I can recall, so it's nice to see you. I had kind of a funny situation this week, actually. I was already kind of busy with teaching and parenting and administrative meetings. And then suddenly on Monday afternoon, I was walking on the treadmill and I got an email from Reverend Kurt Rye at the New York Buddhist Church. And he said that he has to be in Virginia this weekend. They're actually doing the interment of Mrs. Suji's ashes at the Akoji Temple in Northern Virginia. So he has to be there because he actually handles all of the BCA temples on the East Coast. So he had to come down from New York to do that in Virginia. And unfortunately, a couple of his ministerial assistants got sick, and so they weren't able to do the service back in New York like they expected. So could I fill in somehow? So of course, I couldn't go down to New York. I was already going to be here for the Hamilton service. They wanted me to record a video for them. So basically, like Reverend Rye was like he was sending up like the Buddha signal instead of like the bat signal. Oh, we need help. So I had to jump in my Buddha mobile and go rushing off to save the day, such as it is, making it sound much more dramatic and heroic than it was. Really, it was just me, like preparing a Dharma talk and then recording it on Zoom for them, which they'll watch tomorrow. But I was doing all that, and I used a trick of the trade. I reused a version of a Dharma talk that I gave here because I, had short amount of time, right, to suddenly do this amidst everything else. But I did all that, and then I was like, oh, well, I've just prepared a Dharma talk for them, but I also need to say something here for you all who had asked me months ago and were, my actual first priority and responsibility. So what in the world was I going to say? Because I couldn't just say the same thing because you all already heard it, That might be better the second time, who knows? But it just didn't seem fair. I try to never reuse the same Dharma talks for the same audience. So I started thinking, well, okay, what am I going to talk about? And I realized I did have actually something that might work. Last year, I was approached by the editor of a magazine called Eastern Horizon. And this is a Buddhist publication out of Malaysia. It's published by the Young Buddhist Association of Malaysia. And Malaysian Buddhism is mostly Zen or Theravada. They don't have any ideas about Jodo Shinshu because they don't have any sort of Japanese influence in Buddhism there. So they wanted me to explain what is this Jodo Shinshu Buddhism to them, because they try to be ecumenical, try to be open-minded, but they had no idea about this. They I guess read about it on the internet or something. To be clear, Jodo Shinshu is a huge type of Buddhism, but it's not in that part of the world, so they had no idea about this. So I said, sure, I'll do my best. And so they sent me some questions. We did kind of an interview over email style, and I thought, the answers I gave to them, hopefully they were helpful to those folks in Malaysia. But I also thought that the kind of questions they were asking are the kind of questions that a lot of times Buddhists who are not from Pure Land background ask of us. And so the answers I gave to them might be useful to all of us here because we may receive similar sorts of questions sometimes from other Buddhists or from non-Buddhists and this sort of thing. So there were some misconceptions of what they were asking. And I thought, okay, this could be useful for me to discuss. So the first question that they asked me was, why do Jodo Shinshu Buddhists, I'm actually quoting the sentence here, why do Jodo Shinshu Buddhists take refuge in Amida Buddha instead of the three jewels as in the other Buddhist traditions? So right away, this was a very helpful question because it shows a big misunderstanding. In fact, I replied, there's a big misunderstanding here. This is my first reply to them. Because Jodo Shinshu Buddhists do take refuge in the three jewels. All Buddhists do. We do it too. Everybody does this. This is the normal way. So they had misunderstood, thinking somehow we didn't do that. I said, actually, we do that at every weekly service. It's a normal thing. I said that because, of course, I was thinking about Toronto and everything. we didn't actually do it this morning here for the Hamilton service, but I'm not going to tell them in Malaysia that we didn't happen to include that element because it's very common in most Jodo Shinshu services. Not literally everyone, but it's very common. So I wasn't fooling him with this, but anyways, whoops, we didn't do it this morning. Jodo Shinshu takes refuge in the three jewels. These are the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. You've heard this many times, of course. And that's, of course, the Buddha is the teacher, the Dharma is the teachings, and the Sangha is the community that listens to those teachings and then practices them together. So yes, we are part of the mainstream Mahayana Buddhist tradition. We take refuge in the three jewels, not actually specifically in Amida Buddha as something separate from those. Then they asked me, of course, well, who is Amida Buddha and how important is Shakyamuni Buddha in our tradition? So these are natural follow-up questions that outsiders ask about this. And so I told them that Amida Buddha is a very common Buddha described in hundreds of different Mahayana sutras, including the Lotus Sutra and the larger Pure Land Sutra and many, many others. And as I played to them, according to Shakyamuni Buddha, long time ago, there's a bodhisattva named Dharmakara Bodhisattva, or Hozo Bosatsu in Japanese, who made vows to create a situation where all beings, without exception, would be able to reach Buddhahood. And Dharmakara succeeded on the bodhisattva path, and so was able to become a Buddha. And this Buddha is named Amitabha or Amitayus in Sanskrit, or as we say in Japanese, Amida Butsu. And this means infinite light and infinite life, which are themselves symbolic. Much of Buddhism is symbolic. If you didn't know that already, haven't noticed it before, it's very common. So infinite light, of course, is boundless wisdom, and infinite life stands for boundless compassion. But it occurs to me as I'm saying this right now, I just said all this to my students in class on Thursday because we were going through a short, relatively, list of important bodhisattvas and Buddhas as I was teaching them about the sort of variety within Buddhism. And so as I said to them, infinite light represents boundless wisdom because light, of course, dispels darkness, just as wisdom dispels ignorance. And infinite life stands for compassion because this is a Buddha who lives forever in order to never stop freeing living beings, and also being who encompasses all lives within their sphere of concern. So this is expressing compassion in both of those ways for all lives. So infinite life stands for compassion. Hopefully they understood that because that is going to be on the final exam. Yeah, I can tell you guys, that's a spoiler, but nobody's in my class. So I didn't give anything away. I presume they're probably not watching the Zoom this morning. But yeah, I'm definitely going to test them on that, see whether they were awake, paying attention to that sort of thing. So this is that Amida Buddha I explained to the Malaysian Buddhists, and Jodo Shinshu is a teaching specifically that reliance on Amida Buddha allows us to pivot away from our often sort of subtly ego-driven pursuits of spirituality, and instead to relax and allow the great power of the Dharma to work in our lives naturally, bringing us eventually to awakening through a natural process of the Dharma working. So hopefully the Malaysian Buddhists understood what I meant about Amida Buddha there. Hopefully my students also understood in class. And then they were also asking about Shakyamuni Buddha. So I explained a little bit about this figure. I said Shakyamuni Buddha is very important as the source of the teaching on Amida Buddha. And in traditional Mahayana Buddhism, Amida Buddha is often understood as the content of Shakyamuni Buddha's awakening. This is a very technical matter. It deals with the various theories and bodies of the Buddha, something called a Sambhogakaya. I won't lay all that on you this morning, and I'm not going to put that on the final exam. So we'll just move past that one here. We focus on several sutras that were attributed to Shakyamuni Buddha, and these are given a central place actually on our altars. If you go to the Toronto Temple or many other temples, what you'll see is that there's a set of scrolls that are sitting up there on the Naijin in front of the statue of Amida Buddha. There's 4 scrolls. And these are the three Pure Land sutras that are there. Two of those are the first half and second half of the larger Pure Land Sutra, because it's the larger one. It's big. It takes up two scrolls. And then we have the Amida Kyo, the smaller Pure Land Sutra. And we have the Contemplation Sutra. So those are right there, spoken by Shakyamuni Buddha and honored on our altars in this way. And of course, in our study classes at the temples and so on, we explore and reflect on all the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha. So this is an important figure in our tradition. Amida Buddha doesn't replace Shakyamuni, but is instead, they're both important parts of our tradition. Another question that they asked me was, in Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, you rely on the grace of Amida Buddha. Would you say, this is their question, would you say this is a departure from the original approach of Buddha Shakyamuni, who focused on self-cultivation for enlightenment? So I thought that was another great question because, again, it directly stated a misconception that some Buddhists have. And this is something that any group is liable to possibly fall into, including our own. In this case, they're imagining that the way they've been taught Buddhism, that's like the right way to practice Buddhism. And that differences with other groups must mean that those other groups are deviating in some way from the Dharma. So here's what I replied to them. Shakyamuni Buddha taught 84,000 different methods of awakening, according to the vast diversity that there are among Dharma practitioners. Both self-cultivation and reliance on the Buddha's power, these were among the methods that he taught. Each of them is adapted to the needs of different types of people. So we should discern what methods best suit our own individual karma, and we should support people on their own paths, whatever those may be. It's all Dharma. So self-cultivation and relying on Amida Buddha's power, these both go back to the Buddha. They're both different ways that the Buddha taught to different people. Both of them are valuable paths that people can choose in their lives. And as for Jodo Shinshu, our particular path is based on the idea of relying on the Buddha's power of the vows. So the editor kept asking questions. They did tend to have a kind of sectarian approach, which, like I said, this was useful to me because by just kind of stating up front, with the misconceptions, not even necessarily knowing that helped me to immediately be able to address those and not have them like lurking in the background that I didn't know about. So next question was, mindfulness is a core practice in Shakyamuni Buddha's teachings. How important is mindfulness practice in Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, or is it replaced with chanting? So you can see that this is a sectarian approach because the editor asking me these questions imagines that mindfulness and chanting are two different things. And that's because in his particular tradition in Malaysian Buddhism, mindfulness is understood as a meditation technique rather than as a way of being that could be pursued in various sorts of ways. So this is just a particular interpretation of things, fine for these folks, but they have to recognize that there's other ways that don't conflict with that. There's other interpretations. So what I replied was, right mindfulness, this is a fundamental part of Shakyamuni Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path, right? Right mindfulness, right on there. He taught a large number of different forms and practices of mindfulness. So these include shamatha vipassana, zazen, nembutsu, and many other ways to cultivate mindfulness. So not just a single practice was somehow called mindfulness, but rather mindfulness was something that all sorts of different practices strove to inculcate. Nembutsu is the primary practice of Pure Land Buddhism, which is the largest type of Mahayana Buddhism. And Nembutsu itself, as I told him, literally means mindfulness of Buddha. In most Pure Land schools, chanting the name of the Buddha, such as chanting Amida's name, this is a way of focusing the mind, of settling wrong thoughts, and of cultivating awareness. That's a very mainstream approach in a lot of different types of Pure Land Buddhism. And then in Jodo Shinshu specifically, we actually don't use the Nimbutsu specifically as a way to produce mindfulness. Instead, we use this as an expression of joy when we become mindful of great compassion operating in our lives. So mindfulness of or awareness of the Buddha's compassion, which we call shinjin in Japanese, this provokes a grateful response, such as praising the Buddha's name, chanting the sutras, caring for others, and so on. So mindfulness and chanting aren't two separate things, but depending on your approach to Buddhism, you may chant in order to produce mindfulness, or in our tradition, we tend to focus on chanting as the result, as the expression of a mindfulness that has already occurred, a mindfulness awareness of the Buddha's benevolence and of the support that we receive from so many different factors in our lives. Here's our next question. You're ordained as a priest in the Jodo Shinshu Buddhist tradition. Is there a clear distinction between the lifestyle of a priest and the laity in your tradition? For example, in terms of precepts or vows. So you can see this is another point of confusion for them. In their tradition, clergy are celibate monks and nuns who live in monasteries away from the ordinary people. And so our traditions were kind of confusing to them. I think that's quite natural. What I replied was that monastic training and expectations, these actually vary considerably across Buddhist traditions. It's not just that we're different, but there's all sorts of differences amongst all sorts of Buddhists. And even in the same tradition, there's been differences at different times and places very much. For me as a historian of Buddhism, this is very clear. In Jodo Shinshu, our clergy train for several years and have to have a higher education degree, and then they receive further cloistered monastic training ahead of the actual ordination. But the act of ordination itself doesn't involve extensive precepts as it does in many forms of Buddhism. And that means that our Jodo Shinshu ministers aren't really monks and aren't really lay people. And this is following from the example that Shinran Shonin set 800 years ago. Because we don't take those vows, therefore, we're allowed to marry, we're allowed to raise children, we can eat meat, drink alcohol, we can grow our hair, wear secular clothing as a minister. So these are aspects of lifestyle that are similar to the lay people that we are serving. At the same time, we undergo and we continue to practice intensive religious training. We lead services, teach the Dharma, counsel lay people, run temples, and carry out a wide range of activities that make us similar in practice to monastics. So there's kind of aspects of both things going on at the same time. And the distinction between clergy and lay people in Jodo Shinshu, therefore, isn't one of vows or precepts. It's more kind of closer to one of personal commitment, really. And we think that this is actually a benefit because this allows us to live lives that are similar to the lay people. And it's the lay people who are the focus of our type of Buddhism, rather than the monks who are sometimes the focus of some other types of Buddhism. It's the lay people who are the concern. It's everybody who is a regular person trying to do their best. This is what Shinran was focused on. So this is what we focus on. And by not setting up a big difference between the ministers and the lay people, this prevents the creation of like a rigid hierarchy of like value between these, with the clergy somehow being more valued than lay people, as we sometimes see in some traditions, which may, for example, exalt lamas over regular people and give them all sorts of privileges and this sort of thing. We instead prefer a much more horizontal approach to things, recognizing that we are all similar foolish beings embraced by the Buddha, regardless of our ordination status or something else like that, right? Now, of course, there is beauty and value in the precepts-based monastic traditions. I specifically said this in my reply to the editor at the Eastern Horizon, and we're fortunate that there's all the sorts of different paths for people to practice the Dharma. So not every question they asked me was about confusion over Jodo Shinshu. He had some other great questions about the Dharma, just in general. And I'll just use one of these as my last examples for this talk. rather than giving you every single question he asked me. You don't need to be here for an hour. But he had this really good question I do want to end with. He said, quote, "You wrote that gratitude and compassion are key aspects of Shinran's teachings. How can we express them when faced with discrimination, injustice, and wrongdoings by others in our world?" So I was impressed by this, and I wrote back, "Oh, this is a deep question." And here's the answer that I gave to him at that time. I said that gratitude is central in Jodo Shinshu because our primary practice is to deepen our awareness of how we're benefited and to express our thankfulness. So this firstly means becoming mindful of Amida Buddha's compassionate embrace, and then saying the Nimbutsu with a heart of gratitude. Additionally, I explained, this pattern holds true for all the ways that we're benefited by others. Because of the truth of interdependent co-origination, which is a basic sort of insight of the Buddhist teaching, there's a nearly infinite list of things or people or ways that we are being benefited. But we especially develop mindfulness of all the people and the systems that enable our life, enable our living and our liberation from suffering. And we express our gratitude to all of them. So I further explained in my reply, our world is deeply imperfect. This is due to natural material conditions of life in samsara, and also the effects of the three poisons in our lives and in society. So inevitably, we're going to encounter discrimination, injustice, and wrongdoing. This is not the Pure Land, this is samsara, an imperfect situation. When that happens, we have a range of possible reactions. Although I also replied that, sometimes we're constrained as to which choices we can make because of, specific circumstances. If we become aware of injustice, our sense of gratitude for what others have done for us and our sense of compassion at the suffering that they experience, these can be strong motivations to carry out work to achieve a more just and equitable society. And if we ourselves are the targets of discrimination or suffer from injustice, gratitude towards those who ally with us, and compassion for all beings trapped in samsara, including even both oppressors and oppressed alike, all of whom suffer and all of whom are embraced by Amida Buddha. These can keep us from burning out or succumbing to the poison of hate as we nonetheless struggle to push back at forces that would oppress us. So I ended my reply to him by saying, a firm basis of Nimbutsu, rooted in awareness of the Buddha's compassion and in gratitude for the promise of liberation, this can be a powerful source from which to express our wish for a better society and better environment for all. So those sort of expressions of that can take the formal form of chanted Nimbutsu, and they can also take a more informal form of voting, organizing, rallying, educating, and resisting for the purpose of improving society. These two are like a type of Nimbutsu when they're motivated by mindfulness and by gratitude, and with a sense of solidarity with all suffering beings. So that's how I handled trying to talk to a Buddhist from a different tradition about some of the core aspects of our Jodo Shinshu approach, things that he didn't really understand and wanted his readers to be able to understand. Hopefully, trying to address these questions helps to maybe address any questions you yourself might have had about our tradition. I have to say, though, on the other hand, if I confused you further, I apologize. We can talk more about it while we eat, and maybe I can come up with some less highfalutin way to put this to clear up any problems I've caused with this Dharma talk. So in any event, thank you very much for your attention this morning. I'm going to bring the Dharma talk to a close. If we could put our hands together in Gassho, and let's just say the Nimbutsu together to close this. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namanda. 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 Thank you, everyone.